Most people believe they need 8 hours of sleep, but many people rarely get that much. Instead, a common pattern appears: 5 hours of sleep, sometimes 6, often less, work schedules, late-night screens, stressed responsibilities. Slowly, sleep begins to shrink, and 5 hours becomes normal. But inside the brain, something very different is happening. Because the brain does not measure sleep the way we measure time, it measures restoration, and 5 hours rarely provides enough to understand why. We need to look at what happens during a normal night of sleep. Sleep occurs in cycles. Each cycle lasts roughly 90 minutes. Within that cycle, the brain moves through several stages: light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. Each stage performs a different function. Deep sleep repairs the body and strengthens important memories. REM sleep processes emotions and connects ideas. Across a full night, the brain experiences 4 to 6 of these cycles, but when sleep is shortened, those cycles are cut off. 5 hours of sleep usually allows only 3 cycles, sometimes less. This means the brain receives only part of the restoration it expects, and the first system to notice the difference is attention. After reduced sleep, the prefrontal cortex becomes less active. This region is responsible for focus and decision-making. Without sufficient sleep, attention becomes unstable. You may feel alert for a moment, then suddenly distracted. You reread a sentence. You forget what you were about to say. These are signs of reduced cognitive stability, but the changes go deeper. Sleep is essential for memory consolidation. During sleep, the hippocampus replays experiences from the day. This replay strengthens neural pathways. Information moves from temporary storage into long-term memory. With only 5 hours of sleep, this process is incomplete. The brain attempts to store memories, but the system closes early. The result is weaker retention. Learning becomes slower. Information fades more quickly. Sleep restriction also affects emotional balance. The amygdala becomes more reactive when sleep is limited. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex loses some of its regulatory control. This imbalance amplifies emotional responses. Small frustrations feel larger. Stress feels heavier. Patience decreases. Studies have shown that even moderate sleep restriction can increase emotional reactivity by more than 50%. The brain becomes more sensitive to negative signals, but the brain is not the only system affected. Sleep also regulates metabolism. With only 5 hours of sleep, hormonal balance begins to change. Ghrelin, the hormone that signals hunger, increases. Leptin, the hormone that signals fullness, decreases. This combination increases appetite, particularly for high-calorie foods. At the same time, insulin sensitivity declines. The body becomes less efficient at managing glucose. Even short periods of sleep restriction can influence metabolic stability. The immune system is also influenced. Sleep supports immune memory. It strengthens the body's ability to respond to infection. When sleep is shortened repeatedly, immune efficiency declines, inflammation increases, recovery slows. Another important process occurs during deep sleep. The brain activates the glymphatic system. This system clears metabolic waste from neural tissue. Cerebrospinal fluid moves through the brain, removing substances that accumulate during wakefulness. When sleep is shortened, this cleaning process is reduced. Waste remains longer inside the brain. Over time, this may increase neurological strain, but perhaps the most surprising effect of sleeping only 5 hours is that people often stop noticing the impairment. The brain adapts to the feeling of fatigue. After several days, sleep-deprived individuals often believe they are functioning normally, but objective tests show otherwise. Reaction time slows. Memory errors increase. Attention becomes less stable. The brain loses some of its ability to recognize its own decline. This is one reason chronic sleep restriction can be dangerous. Performance decreases, while self-awareness decreases as well. The brain attempts to compensate. Certain regions increase activity to maintain performance, but this compensation requires more energy. Tasks that once felt easy begin to require more effort. Mental fatigue appears sooner. The brain continues working, but with less efficiency. Over time, the system accumulates strain. However, the brain also has remarkable resilience. When adequate sleep returns, recovery begins immediately. Deep sleep becomes more intense. Slow wave activity increases. The brain prioritizes restoration. Memory networks stabilize again. Emotional balance improves. Energy regulation normalizes. This recovery process reminds us of something important. Sleep is not simply rest, it is maintenance. Every night, the brain performs a series of processes that keep neural systems balanced. When sleep is shortened, those processes are delayed, not eliminated, but postponed, and the longer they are postponed, the more the brain waits for the restoration it was designed to receive. 5 hours of sleep may feel manageable, but inside the brain, the difference is measurable. Attention becomes fragile, memory weakens, emotions intensify, energy regulation shifts, and slowly, the brain begins to operate below its full capacity. Sleep does not only determine how rested you feel tomorrow, it determines how clearly your brain can function night after night, cycle after cycle, restoring the balance that wakefulness slowly consumes. But there is another layer to sleeping only 5 hours that many people rarely consider. Sleep does not simply restore the brain, it organizes time. Every night, your brain sorts through thousands of experiences from the day, conversations, images, decisions, emotions, ideas. All of it passes through neural networks that determine what should be kept and what should fade. Sleep acts like a filter. Without enough sleep, that filtering system becomes less precise. Important information may weaken. Irrelevant information may remain. Over time, this creates a subtle kind of mental clutter. You may feel as if your thoughts are less organized, ideas are harder to connect, tasks that require planning begin to feel more demanding. This is not simply fatigue, it is reduced neural efficiency. Another change occurs in how the brain predicts the future. The brain constantly makes predictions based on past experience. It anticipates outcomes, evaluates risk, and adjusts behavior accordingly. Sleep strengthens the neural models that make these predictions accurate. When sleep is shortened, those predictive networks become less stable, decision-making becomes slightly more impulsive. Long-term consequences may feel less important than immediate rewards. Researchers often observe this change in laboratory studies. Participants who sleep less are more likely to choose short-term gains over long-term benefits. The brain becomes slightly more reactive, slightly less reflective. Over time, these small shifts influence behavior. But the brain is not only affected at the level of cognition. Energy management also changes. The brain consumes a significant portion of the body's daily energy supply. Neurons require continuous fuel to maintain electrical signaling. Sleep helps regulate how that energy is distributed. When sleep is restricted, the brain must allocate energy more carefully. Certain networks receive priority, those necessary for immediate survival and basic functioning. Other networks receive less support. Complex reasoning, creative thinking, and long-term planning often fall into this second category. This is why tasks that require deep thinking feel harder. When sleep is limited, the brain is conserving energy. Another surprising effect involves sensory perception. Sleep-deprived brains process sensory information differently. Visual signals may feel slightly dimmer. Auditory signals may feel less distinct. Reaction to environmental cues slows. This does not happen suddenly. It develops gradually as neural processing speed decreases. And yet, people often adapt to this new baseline. They assume their perception is normal. But in reality, their brain is operating with reduced clarity. Sleep restriction also affects how the brain regulates stress. During healthy sleep, stress hormones gradually decline during the night. This allows the nervous system to reset. But with only 5 hours of sleep, this decline may not fully occur. Cortisol levels may remain slightly elevated. The body remains in a state that is closer to alertness than recovery. Over time, this state increases sensitivity to stress. Minor challenges feel more overwhelming. Recovery from stressful experiences takes longer. The nervous system becomes less flexible. Another change involves the brain's reward system. Dopamine pathways help regulate motivation and pleasure. Sleep helps stabilize these pathways. Without enough sleep, reward signals become less predictable. Activities that normally feel satisfying may feel less engaging. At the same time, the brain may seek stronger stimulation, sugar, scrolling, novelty, in an attempt to compensate. This creates a pattern many people recognize. When tired, they crave quick rewards. The brain is attempting to restore balance, but the solution it seeks is stimulation, not restoration. Only sleep can provide that. Over weeks or months, sleeping only 5 hours can reshape daily rhythms. Circadian timing begins to drift. Morning alertness weakens. Evening fatigue becomes irregular. The body struggles to maintain a stable cycle. The brain prefers rhythm, wake, sleep, restore, restore, repeat. When the rhythm shortens repeatedly, the system begins to operate in partial restoration mode, not fully damaged, but not fully repaired either. However, there is an important point to remember. The brain is resilient. If sleep duration improves, recovery begins almost immediately. Deep sleep intensity increases, slow wave activity strengthens, the brain prioritizes repair, memory circuits reorganize, asterisk,